Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. At dawn, silence ruled my vineyard until suburbia came knocking. I left the badge behind for peace among the vines, but when the HOA tried to steal 6 acres with fake maps and dead men's signatures, they woke the wrong man. This isn't just about land, it's about drawing the line and holding it. There's a strange kind of silence that hangs over a vineyard at dawn. Not emptiness, more like calm anticipation. You can hear every bird call, every creak of the soil under your boots, every slow drip of dew rolling off the vines. I'd never thought I'd crave this kind of stillness, not when I spent most of my adult life in cities filled with noise, sirens, and people who thought a warning was just a suggestion. But this land, 14 acres of old vines and dry hills, this was mine now. Bought it 2 years back at a bank auction. Overgrown, half dead, riddled with rusted fencing, and some of the saddest irrigation I'd ever seen, but still breathing. I saw what it could be, so I worked it, rebuilt it, fought with root rot and invasive grass like it owed me money, and eventually the vines responded. I don't talk about my past much, but it tends to speak for itself. 37 years old, former city cop turned county deputy. Before that, I was a surveyor, mapping oil fields and private parcels from Texas to Nevada. I understand boundaries. I respect them. That's not just land law, that's personal. Now I live here full-time, in a modest ranch house I built with my own 2 hands. Oak frame, metal roof, wrap-around porch. Got a dog named Ranger, 2 seasonal helpers for harvest, and a fermentation shed that still smells like paint and Pinot Noir. This was supposed to be my peace. Until I met Sun Hill Vista. The development popped up about 5 years ago, right along my eastern boundary, a sea of beige stucco and solar panels, manicured lawns, and smug SUVs. Cookie-cutter suburbia, pumped full of HOA pride and Stepford smiles. I figured I could live next to it. Didn't expect it to try living over me. My first real brush came with a knock. Bright morning, mid-May. I was cleaning pruning shears on the porch. Woman in a pastel blouse and heels, hell on the gravel, I'll tell you, strides up holding a folder like she's about to audit me. She had that tight-lipped smile that meant I was about to be scolded for something I didn't know I'd done. Good morning. I'm Karen Lawson, president of the Sun Hill Vista Homeowners Association. She said it like I should salute. I nodded. Morning. Derek Holloway, vineyard owner, non-member, neighbor. Her smile stiffened. Yes. Well, we've been wanting to connect with you. There's an orientation next week for adjacent property owners, just to help everyone get on the same page. We believe in harmony. I raised an eyebrow. I'm not on any page, Karen. I'm not part of your association. Different zoning, different history. She blinked, clearly not used to that answer. You might still benefit from being in communication with us. We do share environmental borders. Pretty sure your petunias aren't going to cross the ridge, I said, keeping it civil, but thank you for stopping by. She didn't like that. You could tell by how fast her heels clicked on the way back to her Lexus. Didn't say goodbye. I figured that was it. Boundary marked. Message received. Turns out she doesn't like fences, literal or figurative. A week passed. I spent most of it wiring in new lighting for the fermentation shed and setting up a gravity-fed irrigation line I'd been meaning to install since winter. Ranger did his usual patrols, chasing jackrabbits, barking at wind gusts like they owed him something. Peaceful week. All told, until it wasn't. Saturday morning, right after sunrise, I saw them. 4 people standing just outside my eastern fence line, clipboards in hand, talking in that tense, fake nice HOA tone I'd heard one too many times. One of them, of course, was Karen. I'd know that haircut from a mile off. I walked over, slowly, calmly. I had coffee in one hand and Ranger at my heel. The group turned as I approached. Karen stepped forward like a mayor greeting foreign dignitaries. Good morning, Mr. Holloway, she said, sugar sweet. We're here on behalf of Sun Hill Vista HOA to follow up on our previous visit. I sipped my coffee, didn't realize there was a sequel. She chuckled, humorless, forced, then held up a rolled document like it was a royal decree. We've reviewed updated municipal maps and confirmed that the rear section of your property, roughly 6 acres, is part of the Sun Hill Vista Community Greenbelt. It's designated open access space for residents to enjoy nature walks and recreation. I blinked at her, then at the paper. You're telling me 6 acres of my vineyard magically turned into your walking trail? She didn't flinch. The HOA charter includes provisions for shared green space. It's all mapped, surveyed, and filed. Filed where? I asked. In the county office, she said, with a smile that could cut glass. You can review the paperwork yourself. But in the meantime, we're requesting that you take down the private property signage on the eastern fence line and prepare for transitional access. Transitional access. I had to fight the urge to laugh. I really did. That fence, I said slowly, has been there longer than your HOA's clubhouse. That land has been in private hands since before your subdivision was even a glint in a developer's eye, and there's no record of transfer. I know because I checked it before I bought this place. One of the men behind her tried to interject, but I raised a finger. I don't respond to vague claims or community buzzwords. I respond to deeds, plats, and property law. So unless you have an easement agreement signed by me and notarized in this state, you're standing on the wrong side of the conversation. Karen's expression flickered just for a second, then she smiled wider. We're confident this will sort itself out amicably, but I do hope you won't make this contentious. The HOA has legal standing to pursue access, and resistance could be seen as obstruction. I took a long breath through my nose. Obstruction, I repeated. You're trespassing. Now I'm politely asking you to leave. Karen opened her mouth again, but I turned and walked away. Calm, even pace. I'd learned long ago that nothing unnerves people like quiet confidence, especially the kind built on facts they can't manipulate. Back on the porch, I finished my coffee and made a mental note. Time to double-check every inch of the survey, just in case someone at the county got sloppy or bought. 3 days later, I was on my knees in the main row, tying new chutes to the training wire. When the siren started, 2 patrol cars, lights flashing, came rolling down the gravel road like they were responding to a hostage situation. Dust kicked up, Ranger went ballistic, and my gut told me this wasn't a friendly visit. I stood up slowly, hands in full view, and walked toward the front gate. The first officer out was Jenkins, a kid maybe 25, still green behind the ears, but decent. The second, a guy from the neighboring district I didn't recognize, had his hand hovering way too close to his holster. "Afternoon, gentlemen," I said evenly. "Something wrong?" Jenkins cleared his throat. "We got a 911 call. Report said a man with a firearm was threatening teenagers on the eastern side of the Vineyard." I blinked. Teenagers. There haven't been kids on this property in months, and I haven't touched a firearm all day. The other officer stepped forward, eyeing me up and down. "Do you have weapons on site?" "I'm a sworn deputy. Of course I have weapons on site. Locked in a gun safe in the house. You want to see my badge, too?" He didn't like that answer, but Jenkins held up a hand. "Easy. Derek, we're going to need to take a look around. Standard protocol." "Sure," I said, already turning toward the house. "But you're wasting your time." Ranger, of course, followed us like he was ready to testify. 10 minutes later, they had their walkthrough. No weapons outside, no signs of anyone else on the land, no teenagers, no threats, no disturbances. I pulled up the footage from my property cameras. 5 angles, high resolution, nothing but birds and breeze. Time-stamped and clean. Jenkins watched it all, nodding slowly. "I'm guessing this was a false report," I said, handing him the tablet. "Probably meant to start a paper trail. Callers said the man had a rifle and was yelling at kids to get off the public trail." The other cop added, tone flat. "There's no public trail," I snapped. "And if you want to know where that call came from, trace the number." Jenkins looked at his partner, then at me. "We'll get dispatched to pull the source." 2 hours later, I had my answer. Caller was listed as Karen Lawson. Same home address as before. Claimed she saw it from her backyard. Now, unless she suddenly developed X-ray vision and a 2-mile line of sight through a dense tree line and a ridge, that was a bold-faced lie. I called my supervisor, gave him the rundown, then submitted a formal request for investigation into the false report. It wasn't enough to press charges yet, but it set a precedent. One more call like that, and we'd be talking criminal misuse of emergency services. That night, I sat on the porch with a beer and my notepad, wrote down everything in sequence. Times, names, camera files. Ranger snored beside me, completely unfazed. Me? I wasn't angry, not yet. But there's something about being falsely accused that lights a particular kind of fire, especially when you wear the same badge the system just tried to turn against you. They weren't just poking the bear. They were drawing a target on their own heads. It started with a flyer, glossy, full color, probably cost more than my last grocery run. Found it stuck between the slats of my front gate one morning, flapping in the wind like a cheap political ad. Big letters across the top read, Sun Hill Vista expands access to nature. Below that, photos. Stock images of happy couples on trails, kids flying kites, seniors walking dogs. And right in the middle, a wide-angle shot of my vineyard. My vineyard. Taken from the East Ridge, probably with a drone. You could even see Ranger in the lower corner, mid-bark. I flipped the flyer over. Phase 2 of the community Greenbelt is underway, it read. Thanks to updated property integration and county support, Sun Hill Vista residents can now enjoy seamless access to the Ridge Trail system through newly designated communal land. Newly designated, my ass. I got in my truck and drove straight to the county zoning office. No appointment, just a folder of my deed, the original plat map, and a growing suspicion that this was about to get dirtier than vineyard soil in monsoon season. The receptionist blinked when I dropped the flyer on the counter. You folks aware of this? I asked. She looked it over, then nodded slowly. We've had inquiries. Has anything changed in the official parcel records for Section 17, Plot B? She tapped at her keyboard for a minute, frowning. Actually, yes. There was an updated submission 2 weeks ago, incorporated into HOA Common Use Overlay. Who submitted it? Karen Lawson, she said, reading the digital form. President, Sun Hill Vista HOA. I could feel my jaw tighten. Who approved it? She hesitated. It was flagged as routine. Attached with supplemental maps and notarized authorization from a registered surveyor. I want to see those maps, I said. 10 minutes later, I was sitting at a public records terminal staring at a digital overlay labeled Sun Hill Vista Community Greenbelt. And there it was, 6 acres of my eastern vines highlighted in pastel green, labeled Phase 2 Community Use. The authorization, signed by one Harold B. Ellis, registered surveyor. I recognized the name immediately. I'd met Harold once years ago when I was still working surveys. Old school, slow as hell, but thorough. Problem is, Harold's been dead for 6 years. I stared at the screen, blinking hard. Then I hit print. I took the maps, the flyer, and my deed copies and walked straight into the county recorder's office. Asked to speak with the supervisor. Showed him everything. Walked him through the dates, the names, the impossibility of a dead man signing legal filings. He didn't say much at first, just stared at the paperwork like it had personally insulted his mother. Finally, he looked up and said, "We need to open an internal review." Quietly. "You do that," I said, "and I'm filing a sworn affidavit. If this goes further, it's going federal." By the time I got home, my stomach was coiled tight. This wasn't a flyer. It wasn't a bluff. This was organized fraud executed by people so confident or so stupid they thought no one would check the signatures. I stood at the edge of my eastern row, looking out over those vines. They'd taken years to revive. I knew every damn post, every trellis, every scar on the terrain, and someone just tried to erase 6 acres with a PDF and a ghost. The eastern fence line had always been simple. 4-strand wire, weathered posts, a gate with a rusted chain, and a private property no trespassing sign I'd screwed in myself. It wasn't Fort Knox, but it did the job. Until the morning I found the chain on the ground and 2 of the posts snapped clean at the base. It was just past 6, still early enough for the dew to hang low and the birds to be louder than my thoughts. But Ranger was already growling by the time I opened the door. I followed him around the side of the house and stopped cold. 3 men were standing inside my property, maybe 50 feet past the fence line. Bright neon vests, handheld GPS units, clipboard in one hand, steel tape measure in the other, like they were prepping for a damn county project. One of them glanced up and gave me a little nod, like this was all perfectly normal. I walked straight toward them. No raised voice, no threats. Just a man crossing his own land with a badge in his wallet and a storm brewing behind his eyes. "Gentlemen," I said, voice low, "you mind telling me why the hell you're standing in the middle of my vineyard with your boots on my irrigation lines?" The tallest one, maybe early 40s, clean shave and contractor boots, turned toward me and said, "We're conducting measurements for boundary reassessment. Sun Hill Vista HOA directive. Nothing personal." "Oh, it's about to get very personal," I replied. "You cut my fence. That's felony vandalism, and you're trespassing on private property. You got written permission for this?" He held up a laminated badge like it meant something. HOA authorized contractor. "Not good enough," I said, already reaching for my phone. "You've got 60 seconds to explain, or you're explaining it to the sheriff's office on record." Behind me, One of my workers, Miguel, was jogging over from the barn, eyes wide. They pushed me off the row, he said, panting. Said we weren't allowed to work in this area anymore. Called it communal zone. I told them you'd kill me if I left the drip valves exposed, but they wouldn't listen. I took a deep breath. Then I dialed. 20 minutes later, 2 deputies from our office rolled up, Hughes and Blanton. Good guys, straight shooters. I briefed them fast, showed them the broken gate, the GPS gear, the men still pacing out my land like it was theirs. When asked for documentation, the tallest one handed over a folder. Inside, another copy of the same fake map I'd seen at the county office. Only this one had a bright red stamp that read, Field Execution Phase 2. Blanton muttered something under his breath that sounded a lot like Jesus Christ. While Hughes took statements, I noticed the third man, short, nervous, twitchy, clutching a flash drive on a lanyard. He kept looking toward the trucks like he wanted to vanish. Mind if I take a look at what's on that drive? I asked. He hesitated, then nodded slowly and handed it over. Back at the house, we plugged it in. What we found was worse than I imagined. Folders labeled HOA expansion package, editable map layers, and SIG templates. Templates, as in signatures, as in forgery. That was enough. Blanton cuffed the tall guy on the spot. You have the right to remain silent. The other 2 were detained, their equipment confiscated, and I submitted all files as part of an evidence chain. I wasn't smiling. Not yet. But something in my chest loosened. They crossed the line. And this time, they brought blueprints for a crime scene. By Monday morning, the drive was in the hands of the county prosecutor, and half the sheriff's office was buzzing about the HOA sting, like it was Christmas in July. I turned over everything. Video from my security cams, copies of the fake maps, photos of the fence, statements from Miguel and my other worker, plus a formal incident report signed by Deputies Blanton and Hughes. The flash drive was a gold mine. It didn't just contain my parcel. There were editable overlay maps for at least 7 other properties bordering Sun Hill Vista, some already marked complete, others with notes like owner elderly, unlikely to resist, and confirm, no legal rep on file. Each file had layers of signatures, time-stamped PDFs, and text blocks labeled public use narrative, written like a politician's speechwriter had a minor stroke. Worst of all, the expansion package folder had a subfolder titled Phase 3, Private Negotiations. Inside, drafted purchase options for parcels that hadn't even been contacted yet. HOA was laying groundwork to swallow neighboring properties whole bit by bit, using forged documents and administrative sleight of hand. Karen Lawson wasn't just running a HOA. She was running a land laundering operation. The county prosecutor, Ms. Ryland, called me into her office personally. She didn't waste time. This is organized fraud, she said flatly. At least 5 counts per parcel, and that's before we get into impersonation of public officials, filing false instruments, and whatever the hell they did with that dead surveyor's signature. Harold Ellis, I said, nodding. I worked with him. He was a straight shooter. He'd haunt every one of them for this. She cracked a rare smile. Well, I'll let the courts handle the haunting. That afternoon, search warrants were drafted, subpoenas sent. 3 members of the HOA board were called in for interviews. 1 didn't show. The others brought lawyers and tried the usual song and dance. Must be a clerical error. We trusted our legal team. No knowledge of wrongdoing. Classic maneuver, deny, deflect, delay. Didn't work. The forensic techs went through their HOA office like a tornado. Pulled financials, email chains, old meeting minutes. What they found backed up everything. Coordinated land grabs disguised as community growth, bogus approval forms, retroactively altered records. Turns out Karen had even signed a few things in 2 different handwritings. Slick. But the real kicker came from an unexpected source. A whistleblower, Emily Tran, the HOA's assistant secretary, walked into the sheriff's office late Wednesday, pale and shaking. She looked like someone who just realized her dream job came with a RICO charge. She told us Karen had pressured her to backdate filings, help clean up the public notices, and shred duplicate drafts after each property acquisition. She handed over a burner phone with voice recordings. And one of them, Karen saying, "Don't worry, by the time they figure it out, we'll have the zoning changed and sold. Let them sue. We'll just settle. It's cheaper." That recording hit like a bullet in a fish tank. Ms. Ryland nearly laughed when she heard it. "That's not just intent," she said. "That's a confession with flair." Within 24 hours, a full investigation into Sun Hill Vista HOA was launched. Karen's assets were frozen, her travel flagged, her email server seized, and me. I sat on my porch that night with a second glass of wine and watched the sunset over my vineyard, thinking one thing: you tried to bury me in paper, but I brought receipts. They arrested Karen at her own HOA meeting. It was a Thursday evening, just after 6. Sun Hill Vista's monthly community wellness gathering, their fancy name for board meetings with overpriced muffins and passive-aggressive PowerPoints, was already in full swing when Deputies Hughes and Ramirez walked in with a warrant and a pair of cuffs. Karen was mid-sentence, standing in front of a projector slide that read, "Expanding Together, Phase 3 Vision," when she spotted the uniforms. She paused, blinked like a possum in headlights, and tried to recover. "Officers, if you need something, this isn't—" Ramirez cut her off. "Karen Lawson, you're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, falsifying legal documents, criminal conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." You could have heard a pin drop. Then someone dropped their coffee. I wasn't there in person, but I saw the body cam footage later. Karen didn't go quietly. She launched into some speech about being targeted, about jealous neighbors and political bias. Claimed she was trying to build a better community, that it was all just administrative misunderstanding. They didn't even let her finish. She was cuffed, read her rights, and walked out past a dozen HOA members who suddenly discovered the interesting patterns in the carpet. The fallout came fast. The rest of the board scattered like roaches. 2 members were already under subpoena, and after the arrest, 4 more resigned within 48 hours. Some lawyered up. Others tried to delete HOA emails and were caught immediately. The county filed for emergency receivership of the HOA's operations, freezing all its accounts and placing a forensic auditor in charge. I was called to testify at the preliminary hearing. The courtroom was packed. Press, locals, even a few neighbors who'd kept their mouths shut for too long and were now hoping to see blood. Karen sat at the defense table in a cream blazer like she was heading to brunch, her lawyer whispering frantically into her ear. She didn't look at me once. The prosecutor laid it all out: the forged maps, the backdated submissions, the voice recordings, the flash drive, the whistleblower testimony. It was surgical. Karen's defense tried to claim she had trusted advisors and was unaware of misconduct, but the evidence towered too high. The judge wasn't buying it, especially after they played the recording where she said, "Let them sue. We'll just settle. It's cheaper." I watched her face, not a flinch, either nerves of steel or denial thicker than wet concrete. Then came the part that made the room shift. The prosecutor stated that Sun Hill Vista HOA had operated as a coordinated fraudulent enterprise, targeting vulnerable landowners for systematic acquisition through deception. A criminal enterprise. The words hung in the air like smoke. The judge ordered Karen held without bail, pending trial. The courtroom buzzed. Her lawyer tried to object, but it was like throwing a pebble at a freight train. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. I ducked past them, kept my head down. I wasn't interested in fame. I wanted the truth to stick harder than any headline. That night, I parked the truck at the ridge, overlooking the vines. My fence was still busted in 2 places. The scorch marks from their GPS stakes hadn't fully faded. But I could breathe again. The machine had cracked, and the woman at the center of it all, she was finally behind bars. The trial lasted 9 days. That's longer than most civil proceedings in our county, and way longer than Karen deserved. But I wasn't going to complain. Every extra day in court meant another lie exposed, another record scrutinized, another nail in the coffin of Sun Hill Vista's illusion of legitimacy. I testified on day 3, wore my uniform, badge polished, told the jury exactly what happened, from the first conversation on my porch to the day they found a USB stick full of forged signatures in a man's cargo pants. I walked them through my survey credentials, my review of the parcel overlays, and how the alleged community map was built on fraudulent data, including the signature of a man who'd been dead longer than most of those HOA bylaws had existed. The defense tried to shake me, claimed I had a grudge against the HOA, that I was biased, that I intimidated their contractors. I let the facts speak louder than my badge. Surveillance footage, time-stamped maps. The flyer with my vineyard on it, plastered with the phrase Community Access Expansion. The voice recording where Karen practically confessed. By day 5, the jury stopped looking skeptical. On day 7, the prosecution brought in the forensic document examiner who confirmed the digital manipulation of official forms, layer-by-layer breakdowns, metadata inconsistencies, evidence of copied signatures dropped into PDF files like digital stickers. Karen's lawyer tried to file a motion for dismissal on day 8. The judge denied it, with prejudice. And finally, on day 9, the verdict came down. Guilty on all primary counts: fraudulent filing of property records, conspiracy to commit land theft, criminal impersonation of county officials, obstruction of justice, abuse of HOA authority for personal gain. The sentencing was swift. Karen got 3 years of real prison time, no parole for the first 18 months. 3 other board members received between 6 months and 2 years, depending on involvement. The judge openly rebuked the entire HOA structure as having enabled systemic abuse under the guise of communal governance. And Sun Hill Vista HOA disbanded. Assets frozen, leadership dissolved, the subdivision placed under temporary administrative control by the county until new elections could be organized under strict oversight. The best part? The judge ordered a full land survey audit of the entire neighborhood, funded by the HOA's remaining coffers. Every affected property owner was to receive legal assistance in restoring rightful ownership. That included me. My boundaries were reaffirmed, refiled, and protected with a new level of legal insulation. A notice of no jurisdiction by any existing or future HOA was formally attached to the parcel. That means no one ever again gets to call my vineyard part of some suburban fantasy park. The morning after sentencing, I stood at the eastern fence line, same place they'd cut it open weeks ago. This time the posts were steel reinforced, anchored in concrete, topped with solar-powered motion lights. Miguel walked up beside me, holding 2 mugs of coffee, said nothing, just handed me one. I raised it in mock salute toward the neighborhood. No more flyers, no more drones, no more lies in pastel-colored brochures, just rows of vines and the sound of gravel under my boots, and not a soul standing on the wrong side of the law. Peace doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with trumpets or news vans. It doesn't send a letter. It just shows up quietly one morning when you realize no one's trying to take something from you. That morning came about 2 weeks after the sentencing. Sun Hill Vista had gone quiet. No HOA meetings, no strange vehicles parked on the ridgeline, no letters in my mailbox about cooperation initiatives or shared natural resources. Just quiet. Honest, unbothered quiet. Miguel and I rebuilt the eastern fence first. We didn't just replace the broken sections, we upgraded everything. Steel posts sunk 3 feet into the ground, cross-braced corners, double-gated access with a numeric lock. It wasn't paranoia, it was insurance. While we were at it, I ordered a new sign. Took a week to arrive. Custom made. Black enamel on brass, mounted on a thick cedar post right by the gate. Private property. Entry by invitation only. Love of wine and the law required. It made Miguel laugh when we hung it. The vineyard had bounced back faster than I expected. Grapes are resilient like that. You cut out what's diseased, clear the debris, reinforce the good structure, and things start to thrive again. We had a great harvest that year. Better than the last 2. I bottled the first run in dark glass, clean labels with the ridgeline sketched in silver ink. Simple, proud. I named the blend Boundary Line. Local restaurants picked it up fast. The story behind it didn't hurt either. I never pushed it, but word got around. A sheriff with a vineyard. The HOA sting. A bottle of red named after the legal line nobody should have crossed. Folks started visiting. At first, just locals, people who'd read the court reports or heard rumors from the feed store. Then came the curious ones from town. I built a small tasting deck out by the old tool shed, strung some lights, laid down gravel for parking. Nothing fancy, no brochures, no music, just wine, clean air, and a man who knew his land by heart. One Saturday, a woman showed up with a Sun Hill Vista address on her license plate frame. She looked nervous. Told me she'd always wondered what the vineyard looked like from the inside. Said she used to avoid eye contact when her HOA president gave orders, but now she wished she'd spoken up. I poured her a glass. She bought 2 bottles. Left a $20 tip. It wasn't forgiveness she was after, just distance from the madness. And I understood that. That same week, I got a letter from the county board. Commendation for dedication to land integrity, lawful conduct, and civic responsibility. came with a plaque and a handshake at a public meeting I almost skipped. I wore jeans and a clean shirt, sat in the back, listened to them read my name and clap politely, then left without saying much. I wasn't looking for applause, just boundaries, and the chance to grow something worth defending. I never set out to be anyone's symbol. I just wanted peace, good wine, and a piece of land no one could take from me. But small towns have a way of turning private battles into public stories. And whether I liked it or not, my name started to mean something around here. 3 weeks after the dust settled, I got a call from a councilman I barely knew, inviting me to a community leadership luncheon. I tried to politely decline twice. He insisted, said it was informal, just a thank you from the board. Promised no speeches. He lied. They gave me a plaque, gold-lettered, heavy, for outstanding defense of private property and commitment to civic integrity. I accepted it because I knew it wasn't really about me. It was about every neighbor who'd ever been strong-armed by a homeowners association, every landowner who'd folded because they didn't have the time, money, or background to fight. I stood there in my flannel shirt and worn boots, shaking hands with people in suits who probably couldn't tell a boundary stake from a broomstick. Then I went home and hung the plaque behind the bar in the fermentation shed next to my late uncle's hammer and a corkscrew from my first bottling run. That felt right. Around that time, I got a call from the next county over. A woman named Rachel Dubois, assistant prosecutor. She'd heard about the HOA takedown and wanted to ask if I'd be willing to consult on an emerging issue with a similar pattern. I told her I'd listen. No promises. I'm not out to be a crusader. But I know a con when I see one. I also know how easily people give up what's theirs when someone in a blazer tells them they have to. The Vineyard kept me grounded. Harvest was over, so I spent more time walking the rows, checking trellis tension, watching for early signs of winter stress. Ranger stuck close. Miguel and the others helped expand the tasting deck and dig post holes for a new pergola. One morning, I took the time to walk the full perimeter. 14 acres of clarity. I touched every post, checked every line. Eastern fence held strong. No gaps, no intrusions, no footsteps in the dirt where they didn't belong. At the southern edge, near the old gate, I hung one last sign. OFC, Derek Holloway Sheriff, vintage grower, landowner, no trespassing, no exceptions. Below it, smaller brass plate. You don't touch a single grape without a warrant. Miguel laughed when he saw it. You really think anyone's going to try again? He asked. I looked out at the hills. Sun rising behind the ridgeline. Dew steaming off the vines. Not twice, I said. Later that day, a local reporter came by. Young guy, trying to write something inspiring for the Sunday column. He asked what advice I had for folks dealing with overreaching HOAs. I thought about it, then told him the truth. Know your land, know your rights, and don't let the fear of paperwork stop you from pushing back, especially when they're the ones bluffing. He scribbled it down like I'd said something profound. But it wasn't profound, it was simple. People build fences to keep the world out. Me? I build mine to remind it where I begin.